It's Melinda, and we're going to do a really overview of the role of nutrition and exercise in breast cancer.
I'm going to keep you on time.
Keep me on time. So
We can't advance. Okay.
what did you press? Okay. All right. So when we look at from the role of nutrition and exercise, there's actually different facets. You know, we look at prevention of cancer, we look at nutrition and exercise during diagnosis and treatment, and we also look at it during survivorship. And they're all like nuances and different changes in each of those aspects. So if we look at prevention, the role—
And you could think of this as prevention of second cancers as well.
Yes, it's almost like it's like a cycle. When you go through treatment and you're in survivorship, when you're in survivorship, you're also all about prevention again. So you're back into that cycle. So the way we explain the role of nutrition and exercise, it's a term we call epigenetic effect, meaning it influences the course of the development of cancer over time, because this normal cell becoming a cancer cell takes place over a long period, and it goes through different stages, and diet and exercise can actually interfere with this progression
In a good way.
in a positive way. It could slow it down, it could even disrupt it, but none of it is 100% guaranteed. It always helps, it never hurts. All right, so that's kind of how we explain it. So it kind of affects the environment in your body that supports health and supporting your immune system. So so that was just prevention I was talking about. So now when we switch to diagnosis and treatment, all of a sudden our nutrition intervention, our skills change, because now the actual treatment that you're in can prevent receiving good nutrition through just symptoms from the treatment. So you have fatigue, loss of appetite, dry mouth, taste changes, mouth sores, difficulty swallowing, nausea, diarrhea. What's happening is, as particularly chemotherapy is attacking the cancer cells, which turn over quickly, those same cells that line your digestive tract turn over quickly. So it's kind of like a side effect of the chemo. So it makes eating and digestion more difficult. So we have a whole set of skills that we use to help you continue to nourish your body despite these side effects, like workarounds. Then when you're through with your active treatment in survivorship, now we're changing gears again, and now we're managing what we call the late effects of the treatment. So again, we still have that fatigue, and with fatigue, you're too tired to cook. You're too tired to go food shopping. All right, so what are strategies to make it easy to cook and eat well, or even minimal cooking? You can still have lingering digestive issues, but now we're also, there's an increased risk for early onset heart disease, diabetes, bone loss. These are all normal things of aging. They can just be a little accelerated from the treatment. And we know how to treat all this through diet and exercise. So this is all part of just healthy aging. It's kind of how I explain it. Some women get treatment-induced menopause from the chemotherapy. Sometimes weight issues become a problem. But I want to point out another big thing is living with the fear of recurrence. And we recognize that, and a fear of recurrence can actually become a fear of food, because you think, oh, something I ate caused my cancer. Something I will eat will cause my cancer to come back. And then you start doing what I call the rabbit holes, going down rabbit holes on the internet, and you can come up with some crazy ideas about nutrition. And it's kind of fueled by this fear of recurrence. So it's something we address. And what I want to do is very quickly kind of establish, what do we mean by good nutrition, right? And the primary role of nutrition is to fuel your body and to nourish your body. And people often say, well, we don't know what it means to eat well. Oh, yes, we do. This is very well established. So since 1980, there's what we call the dietary guidelines for Americans. You can look this up. If you want to really just take like a good course on what good nutrition is, just go online here to the dietary guidelines. So they look at all the research and literature and collate it and come up with a set of recommendations for what it means to eat well at every life stage, men, women, children, adolescents, pregnant women. And it's all to maintain health and prevent chronic disease like heart disease, diabetes, and certain types of cancer. Now we take that same body of knowledge and now all that evidence-based nutrition, and now we focus it on cancer. And this is where the World Cancer Research Fund and the American Institute for Cancer Research, again, great place to go online and look up. They take these, the dietary guideline recommendations, look at all the research worldwide on what good nutrition is and apply it to cancer. And these are the guidelines they come up with. Number one, be at a healthy weight. And healthy means a lot of things. It doesn't mean a BMI of a certain number. It just means a weight where you're feeling strong and nourished. That's how I describe it, right? It could be at any weight, any number, I should say. And the first task is to be physically active, which Melinda will get to. And then we get to the diet piece, right? And the first is eating a diet rich in whole grains, vegetables, beans. Well, what are those foods? They're all foods that come from plants. So it's all plant foods. Then the next is limit consumption of fast food and processed food. So that's like non-food. So it's like eat more plants and limit these manufactured foods. And we know what those are, right? They're things that you can't grow in the ground, like Pop-Tarts, right? One of my favorite foods to love and hate at the same time. Anything pretty much served through a drive-through window is a highly processed food. Then after that, there is to limit your consumption of red meat and processed meat. And that's really to support heart health, largely too. Doesn't mean you have to be a vegetarian. It means that the proportion on your plate, which I'll get to the next slide, is you want more plant foods and less animal foods, okay? Then the next, and this is the biggest one, limit your consumption of added sugars in the things you drink. So that's like regular soda, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Gatorade, energy drinks, Red Bull. We really want to keep a real low limit on that. We'll get to those numbers. Limit alcohol, and a big one, do not use supplements to protect against cancer. That's not the way to go. It's food and exercise, not supplements. And for moms, breastfeed if you can. And then after a cancer diagnosis, again, we go back to prevention, right? So it's kind of a cycle. So let's take a quick look at what do we mean by eating more plant foods. We call this a predominantly plant-based diet, meaning you fill 2/3 of your plate. If you think of your plate, think of where your food comes from. Does this food come from a plant or does it come from an animal? So you want the majority of your plate to be filled with foods that come from plants and just 1/3 from animal sources. Animal sources would be beef, chicken, fish, dairy.
And one thing I always find challenging is I have 2 boys who are now 18 and 19 years old. And when I say, oh, what do we want for dinner tonight? They always think of the animal product first. Oh, steak or chicken or whatnot. And I challenge us to think, all right, now what vegetables or plants do we want? And then the condiment is the meat.
Meat as a condiment.
But it's hard when you think that way. It's very hard.
The typical American diet is very meat-centric, animal-centric. And then there's all this buzz about, we all need more protein. We need to eat keto diets. It's like, no, that's not the foundation of a balanced nutrition plan, right? So the thing is, when you fill your plate with plant foods, what happens? You get a big dose of fiber, and fiber is a gift of health to your body. You get a big dose of what we call phytonutrients, and I'll show you what those are on the next slide. You naturally decrease your added sugars. It's lower in sodium, it's lower in saturated fat. And the thing is, this is just a template, right? That can be applied to any culture, no matter what country you come from, what cuisine you follow, you can follow this pattern. So when people say, what's the best diet? I hear it's Mediterranean. I'm like, well, that's just one way of doing it. I wouldn't ask, let's say, a Pima Indian in Arizona to follow a Mediterranean diet. They'd look at me like, what food is that? Every culture has their own foods that fits into this template. So you can adapt this to any culture, so that's the beauty of it.
And the other thing now added on any food that you buy, there's food labels, and the added sugar is a new line on the food label. And if you look at that regularly, you can add up throughout the day how many added sugars, or you can just educate yourself. Oh, this drink doesn't have any added sugars, or this food doesn't have any added sugars.
You become a label reader.
Mm-hmm.
That's a takeaway. So what are the benefits of this, what we call a predominantly plant-based diet, is that just by following it, you just naturally get better weight management without dieting, without even tracking your weight on the scale. And it does provide prevention of 14 different types of cancer, including breast cancer. It helps prevent heart disease, type 2 diabetes. And the way it works, I know you heard a lot of mechanisms, I'm sure, in these other presentations, but remember, this is like, it works with your whole body, where it reduces inflammation in your body, reduces circulating insulin levels, and supports your immune system. So all of this creates a hormonal environment that promotes health and discourages cancer growth. So that's that epigenetic effect. Now, the keystone of the predominantly plant-based diet is, one of the best ways to teach it is to say colors. Colors of the rainbow. When you have your plate filled with 2/3 of plant food, include as many colors as you can in your course of your week. And you capture these colors, you capture all these phytonutrients, phyto meaning plant. They have very chemical sounding names, but this is food as medicine. Through mankind, we use plants as medicine. And now we have modern medicine, which is great, but don't forget about this. Right. So these are the compounds that actually do what I just said before, help support your immune system, reduce inflammation, reduce insulin levels. So we teach it by color. So when you look at your plate, add a color at every meal. What colors do I have on my plate? And that's one of the best things you can do in terms of increasing the quality of your eating. And my last slide is, I just described this predominantly plant-based diet, right? Do you know how hard it is to do this? Because we've created this environment that works against us, right? The diet we want reduces added sugars, is lower in salt, is low in fat. Yet we create an environment with these fast foods and convenient foods that are high in added sugar, high in salt, high in fat. So you have to be aware that it's the environment we're in. We're up against it. So to eat well, you have to be very deliberate and with good intention to say, I'm going to make my own decisions about what I eat, because the environment and fast food industry is against you. So I always say it's the environment, stupid. It's not us. Our bodies are working just fine. All right. So I would just, one of the easiest ways to do this is just swear off drive-through windows. That goes a long way to cutting this out. So now I'll hand it over to Melinda to do the exercise.
So the current recommendation for how much physical activity you should get is based on hundreds and thousands of studies. And the maximal benefit from physical activity is with 2.5 hours per week of a moderate intensity activity, such as brisk walking. So oftentimes you'll hear 30 minutes a day, most days of the week. If you do vigorous intensity activity, that the goal is 75 minutes per day. And that might be like jogging or bicycling or some combination of the two. And then ideally twice a week of some sort of strength training program. This is the recommendation. However, the evidence, also based on thousands of studies, has shown going from nothing, which is all the way over on the left, going from a very sedentary lifestyle to just something, even if it's not anywhere close to that recommended amount of 2.5 hours per week. Just doing something is better than nothing. And in fact, it's where you see a significant reduction in risk. This is for all-cause mortality. This is based on so many studies where they enroll people at around age 30 or 40, and they complete questionnaires. They put accelerometers on them. They do fitness tests, and they follow them for 10, 20, 30 years until so many have heart disease or cancer or death. And then they can look back at what was the reporting of physical activity or fitness level, and they see significant benefit from just increasing a little bit of walking or exercise. And to me, it's jaw dropping on how consistent the results are of nothing to something. So don't sort of get caught up with having to do, like if you had a week of nothing and it's now Sunday, well, doing a walk on that day or some sort of activity on that day, the seventh day of the week, has benefit. This is also shown in steps per day where so most people have an iPhone, and you have the Heart app on your iPhone, and you can click it and you can see all the walking you did yesterday, the day before, the past week, the past month, and it'll even average it out. And you might have heard that, like 10,000 steps per day is the recommended amount. And that's your entire movement from when you wake until you go to bed at night. And that's based on, once again, so many studies consistently showing the maximal benefit. This is looking at survival outcomes and all-cause mortality, that the 10,000 steps here, you can see the most benefit with lowering your risk of mortality as well as cancer mortality. And that anything beyond 10,000 steps, there isn't any added benefit. 2,000 steps is a mile of walking. So 10,000 is about 5 miles. Now, that's not necessarily going out for a 5-mile walk. That's all the walking you do. So if you look at your iPhone, you can look at, well, how much walking did I do yesterday? And let's say it says 3,000 steps. Well, then you can start to think, all right, I want to add 1,000 steps every day or a half a mile. And it can be very motivational. It could be 5 p.m., 6 p.m., you just get home from work and you're like, look, I have time to do 30 minutes. Hopefully if you live in a neighborhood where it's safe to walk, or you can figure out a route maybe to do on your way home. And there was a most recent analysis that came out just late last year that looked at this specifically, like if you broke it down to 1,000-step increment, this outcome was all-cause mortality. And it was it was 17 cohort studies. Cohort studies are those prospective studies where you capture information and follow people. So there's no recall bias. There's no sort of manipulating the data, because it's you capture it and you follow people. And these 17 large cohort studies, over 200,000 participants, followed for 7 years, and they found a 1,000-step increment, a half a mile increase per day in your walking, led to a 15% reduction in all-cause mortality. And I like what Maura said. There's no harm in eating well and exercising. There's only benefit. Just invest in a good pair of walking shoes, right? So I think these are nice. Often people don't believe this because that seems so simple to just try to walk more. But actually it's profound, and these studies have shown it time and time again. Maura mentioned, this is specific to breast cancer, that the 3 primary mechanisms is through inflammation, estrogen, and insulin. This is how they work. By the more active you are, it can work directly on systemic inflammation levels, estrogen and insulin and other metabolic hormones, or indirectly through weight or some other mechanism. And we have tested this in a number of our trials, showing taking people who are very inactive and adding an exercise as well as a nutrition program. And over 6 months, we see profound changes in these markers. This was a study a number of years ago in women who are postmenopausal without breast cancer. But you can see here on the left, this is estrogen, which is the most common estrogen in postmenopausal women. And we know estrogen is an adverse marker for breast cancer. And women who are diagnosed with estrogen receptor positive breast cancer, they're put on an aromatase inhibitor or tamoxifen, and that can help with outcomes. But this was an exercise and nutrition intervention showing that all the negative, the reduction in estrogen with, it was a 2.5 hour per week walking program among women average age of 60 years old who weren't exercising, adding in that lowered estrogen levels. And then the combination with healthy eating, the diet that Maura just recommended, 10 to 15% reduction in estrogen levels, remarkable. And then you can see all these other hormones that were reduced with this exercise and nutrition program. And then here at Yale, we led a trial among women who had completed breast cancer treatment. They were on average 2 years from their diagnosis. And they enrolled, they were not currently doing an exercise program or eating healthy. And we enrolled them into our trial. As Maura mentioned, by just switching to that plant-based diet, they had on average the 2 purple bars had about a 6% reduction in body weight. It wasn't a diet. In fact, we call diet a 4-letter word. We don't recommend people diet. It's how to change their eating to be more plant-based. And then with that exercise. And then here you can see that this program of exercise and nutrition led to a 30% decrease in CRP, which is C-reactive protein. It's a marker of chronic inflammation in your body. So after 6 months, a 30% decrease in CRP. It was remarkable. And it was not a hard walking program or, shifts in your diet. And then also favorable changes in insulin and leptin. And this trial, while it was done here and specific to women with breast cancer, we've seen this in many other studies done by our colleagues across the nation and in the world, similar findings. We just completed a trial that was during chemotherapy for breast cancer. So we enrolled women before they began chemotherapy, and we followed them through chemo with our nutrition and exercise program to look at more important clinical outcomes. And the nutrition program was, as Maura explained, following the dietary guidelines. And then the exercise program was what we explained as well. I just want to get to, we showed during chemotherapy, women randomized to the intervention, which is the blue bars, were able to increase their physical activity and able to increase their diet quality. It's the way we measure it through the food frequency questionnaire called the Health Eating Index. So they were able to do this during chemotherapy. But shocking and of great surprise to us is what we found among the women who had chemo before surgery. So they had neoadjuvant chemotherapy. And at the time of surgery, we were able to look at what's called their PathCR, pathologic complete response. So any evidence of breast cancer at surgery. And those randomized to the nutrition and exercise intervention, 53%, the orange bar here, 53% had a PathCR, no evidence of breast cancer at time of surgery. Compared to 28% among those in our usual care group. So exercising and eating healthy during chemotherapy led to a twofold more no evidence of disease at time of surgery. We're going to follow this up in a new trial to focus specifically on triple negative breast cancer. In closing, our last slide, I don't expect you to read this. This is a poster that was given at ASCO, but we are opening a trial specific to women with metastatic breast cancer. It will be exercise only, a home-based exercise program. To be eligible, you can't currently be exercising at the recommended amount. So if you're doing less than that, 2.5 hours per week, then you would be eligible. And the only requirement is to come to Yale for a baseline treadmill test and a couple other little measures, and then a follow-up treadmill test as well. So with that, any questions for Maura or myself? You can come up.
I'm curious about the animal-based protein, or and there was no distinction made between chicken and fish and beef, as I recall. And my understanding is that fish is significantly better for your health than beef or chicken. Is that true, or is that something you could eat as animal-based?
Yeah, I mean, we consider that part of the 1/3 of your plate. You want
Right.
fish 2 to 3 times a week, and maybe beef once a week. So you want fish more frequently and beef once a week, but it still takes that smaller part of the plate. It's still a protein, animal protein. So you just have it more frequently, more often. You have fish
You can have fish more
2 to 3 times a week, and then we try to say have beef once a week. And the rest is chicken, turkey, eggs. Or beans, or no
What
animal.
if you're a vegetarian?
Beans, protein,
Beans,
and
yeah.
plant proteins,
Okay.
tofu, which does not promote, soy does not promote breast cancer. Still that thing.
In the back.
That's an old one, yeah.
So I have 2 questions. So one is, how about carb? What's the percentage of a carbohydrate you need to put on your plate?
That's a great question. So plant foods are majority carbohydrate.
Yeah.
So when you do the 2/3 plate plant foods, then about 50 to 55% of your incoming energy calories are carbohydrate. So and that's good. But what's nice about what differentiates the plant carbohydrate, Mother Nature packages it with fiber. So you get carbohydrate with fiber, and then all the colors in your fruits and vegetables, carbohydrate with phytonutrients. So these are what we call nutrient dense carbohydrates. versus let's say
Right.
a candy bar. You know, that's all carbohydrate, no fiber, no phytonutrients.
All sugar.
All sugar.
And
So it's the type of carb. So carbs with fiber and phytonutrients, 55% of your intake should be that.
And one tip I often look at that Maura's taught me when I'm in the grocery stores, if we look again at the food label, you want the fiber to be almost twice as much as
Added sugar.
the added sugar. So if there's no fiber and a lot of added sugar, maybe, yeah,
So how about milk?
milk.
Milk is an animal product and it's very valuable, but I promote low fat or skim, so you get rid of the saturated fats.
I see.
But that's a great, that's part of the animal part of your food.
Would the milk, consist of estrogen level as well? Would that be a concern?
No.
No, okay.
No, I know there's some, no. I know that's kind of some scuttlebutt out there about dairy promoting estrogen and, you know. Yeah, maybe, take that off your worry list. That's where people become fearful.
Just let you know, we're at time 11:35. If you want to go to the next session, you're welcome to stay and hear this again. And if you have other questions, you're more than welcome to stay. But I just want to keep you alert that the other session. Thank you so much. And feel free to email us with any questions or comments.
What's your income?
I can write it down.
I get that a lot at the next door.
Girl next door.
Coffee's good, but don't add a lot of cream or sugar. I don't think.
Oh, I see. Could be giving
And
So where do you?
I agree with you, but my daughter's. Thank you. Sue.
Yeah, what's your name? Stella. Okay, great. Great to meet you.
Hi, I
Do
have
you work at Yale?
Yes, yeah.
What floor are you on? What's your department?
Oh, so I'm, our office buildings aren't in the hospital. Yeah, none of the, yeah, no, but if they're right there, they're right walking distance.
Over Park Street?
Yeah, or Cedar Street. Yeah.
Because I work at the pharmacy downstairs.
Okay. Oh, that's great. That's great.
some requirements whether or not I see the trial.
Yes, if you give us our name, we can.
Well, I walk about.
Yes.
200
Thank
I
you so
usually-
much.
So I'm
Yeah,
just
usually,
underneath.
Yeah.
Where I should be. So I
No,
should-
it's only winter.
No,
That's great.
Okay, so I'm gonna
Well, give us your name just in case.
Okay.
Because, when I'm talking
Thank you so
But I
much.
don't
if we do a
Wait.
treadmill test and there's room to improve your fitness level, it might
Right.
be. So let me get your name.
Sure.
Here, I'll just put it in my notes.
I was just wondering that, like, I know these, I haven't been doing that good.
Okay.
Korean
No, nourishing your body, exercising.
Okay, and then, do you have an email or?
Doesn't have to be
Yeah.
all of them.
Black
But
mark
if
from
you-
internet.
the more like colorful
Black
fruits and
mark
vegetables you add
dot
into your day, it fills you up,
Yeah.
you feel better, your energy
At
levels
gmail
better,
dot
and
Right.
then, oh, by the way,
Great.
your body
We
goes
will
to a
reach
good
out to
weight.
you one way or the other.
And so that.
Yeah, I'm a vegetarian.
And so this will only be an exercise intervention.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. The thing that I thought I might be able to, I don't do weight.
Yeah,
training.
so that might, yeah.
Yeah, I need to add that. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
That's it.
And I felt looking.
Great. You hit upon it, that's it.
Do you guys offer like, I don't know where to find like a massage therapy or.
Isn't it at, we have it, you go integrated, called the integrated medicine at Smilow.
So if you go on the Yale Cancer Center website or the Smilow Cancer Hospital website, and if you go to integrative medicine and then.
Yeah, they
They
have
have-
massage therapists there. that
Oh.
you can
Cause I
make
work
appointments with.
close to Yale, I work in Hampton Hall, I teach in the
Okay.
school there, yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah, I'm teaching. So from there to here, might not be that bad to go after work.
No, that's good.
Integrative medicine.
Medicine.
Acupuncture, massage
Yeah,
therapy.
those, I
yeah.
wanna, the
Our cancer center
my
director,
neck
Eric,
hurts,
goes
this
to it.
hurts,
Yeah.
always hurts, I don't know,
Yeah.
it's always a little fatigue, you
Take
know?
advantage of all these
That's why,
services
yeah, I
and
don't, I
resources.
really didn't know, so
Yeah.
I'm going.
And it's not that you can't go to any masseuse, but their touch and their
But they're
approach might be.
exactly for what
Yeah.
I need, that's the
Yes,
thing.
yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so
Yeah,
much, very
good.
beneficial, I'm so glad I came. Thank you, have a
Wonderful.
good day.
That was good though. Yeah. Welcome.
Come on in.
And lunch is after this, so if it goes a little bit longer, it's probably okay. So maybe we'll wait a minute more. Because what did the session you were in just wrap? Okay. Hi, Jenna, how are you? That was so good this morning, and I love the way you explained, yeah.
Complex thing.
I think that went well. Yeah. And thank you for teaching on Tuesday. So Nate came 2 weeks ago, and it was good because he gave the pharmacotherapy presentation and then his culinary medicine. But it was good because I liked him talking about pharmacotherapy and Ozempic and all that, because he, of course, thinks nutrition is so important and has to. You can't just tell someone to take a pill.
Do you want me to take, I can't remember, last year I put that Ozempic, New York Times headline, and Ozempic is not the answer to society's ills.
Well,
Do you
I
want me to
think-
take that out?
Yeah, I think just, you can keep it in, you can do whatever you want. I think,
I might tie it into his
I think
talk and-
if you do tie it in, just the importance of that, there hasn't been research, like really studying, they lose their appetite and they might only be eating junk,
Right.
right?
I would
and-
make that point.
Right, yeah, exactly.
And the loss of muscle.
Yeah. So,
Oh.
Mary Newhouser and I are writing a commentary on GLPs and cancer and sort of the concerns. We have to be careful because I tell people all the time, health, the BMI, like now all of a sudden there's these revolutionary drugs and we don't want people to take it. So we're not saying you can't take it, but let's do more research where you combine,
And the long-term effects.
yeah, and they'll say the pharmaceutical, the endocrinologist say, oh, we tell them that, but they don't.
No.
Okay, good morning. It's still morning, right?
Still trickling in.
Yeah, okay, so we'll wait one more second, and maybe lunch is at 12, so if we go 5 minutes into lunch, it's okay, right? So, like they never really, and in all the trials followed up how many actually, they'll say they had offered nutrition and exercise and, student studies, but they never follow up the attendance to them.
Right, and how many sessions.
Even
and-
measure diet.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Agreed.
Okay, we're gonna get started if anyone's in the hallway. Okay, all right, welcome everyone. I hope this has been a great morning so far. We're gonna talk about the role of nutrition and exercise in the management of breast cancer. I'm Melinda Irwin. I'm a professor of epidemiology at the Yale School of Public Health and also deputy director for the Yale Cancer Center.
And I'm Maura Harrigan. I'm a registered dietitian and board certified in oncology and nutrition. And my sidebar is to say that Melinda's my boss. So
But we are a great team. We've worked together for over 15 years and done a lot of trials here at Yale focused on the role of nutrition and exercise and have found amazing impact on clinical outcomes related to breast cancer and really the importance of nutrition and exercise and how it can change some of these outcomes.
I would say, if you have questions as we go along, please, just shout out, raise your hand, okay? So to start with, when we talk about nutrition and exercise, there are different nuances to depending on where in the cancer trajectory you are. So we have certain strategies for prevention. We have other strategies for during diagnosis and treatment, and then even more strategies for survivorship, which eventually brings you back to prevention. When you're in survivorship, is to prevent, go back to prevention guidelines. So let's look each one separately and quickly. So in prevention, the role of nutrition and exercise has an effect on the progression of cancer. So cancer develops in a series of steps over time, from a normal cell to a cancer cell. Now we're finding that the role of nutrition and exercise can disrupt that progress, can slow it down, or maybe even disrupt it. So that effect, the effect on this is called epigenetic effect of the role of nutrition in cancer and exercise in cancer. Any questions about that? All right, so that was in prevention, all right? In diagnosis and treatment, things start to shift because now the treatments can often make it very difficult to nourish your body. Right? So the way chemotherapy works, it attacks cells that have a high turnover. Well, guess what? The lining of your digestive tract is lined with cells with high turnover. So you get this side hit from the chemotherapy where now all of a sudden mouth sores, chewing, swallowing, taste changes, nausea, diarrhea, constipation, all these affect your ability to nourish your body. And as dietitians, we have all little workarounds for how you can work around all these side effects and still nourish your body. It's so important, especially during treatment. And the big one is fatigue. You're just tired, and it's hard to cook when you're tired. It's hard to food shop when you're tired. So again, we have a lot of strategies to make nourishing your body simple and easy. Then when we go into survivorship, now that's a whole other set of nutrition concerns, because now we're dealing with what we call the late effects of the treatments you received. So again, there's that issue of fatigue. That's a tough one. That lingers. And we still have continuing digestive issues, which tend to resolve over time. But now we also have the common diseases of aging, as I call them, heart disease, diabetes, bone loss. But because of the cancer treatments, it could be accelerated. So again, good nutrition and exercise helps manage that and slow that process down. We have other issues with weight management, either through treatment-induced menopause. Some women are rapidly thrown into menopause because of the treatment, how to manage your weight. But a big one is fear of recurrence. And I bring that up because that can fuel a fear of food. So people start worrying about what they're eating. Something I ate caused my cancer. Something I will eat will cause my cancer to come back. And people start searching, and I say go down rabbit holes on Dr. Google, and you can end up in very bad places there. So that there's a lot of misinformation out there. So I just want to kind of briefly give you what does it mean to eat well. Because people think we don't know what it means to eat well. And my answer is, oh, yes, we do. We really do. And the primary role of nutrition is to fuel your body and to nourish your body. Now, the place to go, if you want to go online, is go to the dietary guidelines for Americans. These have been in existence since 1980. They're reviewed every 5 years. They go through all the literature and research and combine it, collate it, and say, this is the best way to eat at every age in the life cycle, from babies, children, teenagers, every life stage. It's a wonderful resource. If you want, that's the best primer for good nutrition. And this is how to eat well for healthy aging and prevention of heart disease, diabetes, and certain cancers. Now, there's another body of work that takes all that information and applies it to cancer. And this is done by the World Cancer Research Fund and the American Institute for Cancer Research. Again, great website to go to. And they outline what are the recommendations for cancer prevention. And I'd like to just walk through them. So the first one is be at a healthy weight. That's kind of surprising. You would think it would be something food related, but it's weight related. And when we say healthy weight, we're not talking about any BMI. right? Or a particular number. We're just talking about being a weight where you're comfortable at, where you feel strong, where you're exercising, where you're nourishing your body, and you feel energized. That can be a different number for everybody, right? The way you get there primarily is through physical activity, which Melinda will talk about, right? That's job one, being more active. Then we get to food. And look what the first foods that are recommended. It's eating whole grains, vegetables, and fruit and beans. Well, what kinds of foods are those? They're foods that come from plants. So now I want you to think about food differently. I want you to think about, where does this food come from? Does it come from a plant or does it come from an animal? So it's plant versus animal. And that's how
Or
we're,
factory.
or made in a plant. That's it.
Yeah,
Or
it's made in the
manufactured.
plant, don't eat it.
Right. So it's like a plant that a food that you recognize, that your grandmother would recognize, all right, that somehow came from the ground, all right, and as close to the ground as possible, and then versus animal. And then we get to processed foods, which is the next one. That's the foods manufactured in plants. Those aren't real foods. Okay, that's just a big industry. So we want to limit the consumption of these fast foods that are not recognizable. Like my favorite one is Pop-Tarts. So think of Pop-Tarts. That does not exist in nature, and it's full of everything artificial. Those are the foods you limit. I'm not saying you can't have one every once in a while. I'm one for a jelly donut, at Dunkin' Donuts, on those days you need them. So like, that's okay, but it can't be the main, it's not breakfast every day. Then we get to the animal part where we're limiting the consumption of red meats and highly processed meats. And the next big one is limiting consumption of added sugars, particularly in your liquids that you drink. This is probably the key change most people can make, is looking at how much sugar are in the beverages that they're drinking. And I'm talking about Red Bull, Gatorade, regular sodas, high C fruit punch, right? I'm not talking about fruit juice, 100% fruit juice. I'm talking about, again, manufactured drinks that put a lot of added sugars. Then we limit alcohol. And next big one, which might be surprising, do not use supplements for cancer prevention, right? We do not use supplements. We use real food, all right? The last is, again, promoting breastfeeding. And after your cancer diagnosis and treatment and you're in survivorship, go back to following these guidelines for prevention. So any questions so far? Ooh, okay.
I assume you're not fond of artificial sweeteners either.
Actually, I'm okay with those.
Really?
Yes. Particularly like aspartame, which is just two proteins linked together. It was an accident in the lab. So when it goes into your body recognizes that as proteins and you digest it as a protein. So that's actually quite useful. I know. I threw you on that one, right? Someone else had a question.
Better than
Trivia.
Well, Truvia is it's a different kind of sweetener. It's like a super sweetener. Again, an accident in the lab where just a little bit imparts a lot of sweetness. So it's useful. It's not harmful. Neither one are harmful.
Especially if it helps you get rid of the added sugars.
Yeah, if it means going from regular Coke to Diet Coke, that's a win. Okay. Yeah.
There's a number to target, like of the sugars that might be in the foods, because we see it all the time. There's so many things added.
Well, we have it next slide. Yeah, you're a step ahead of me. Good for you. So yeah, in the middle of that slide, keeping your added sugars to less than 30 grams a day. They're listed on the food label in grams. So that's about 7 or 8 teaspoons. The food labels are in grams, but Americans think in teaspoons. So 1 teaspoon is about 4 grams. It's a mess up with the labels. They should be in people terms, but they're not. So that's a key place to look. So this pattern of eating is called what we call predominantly plant-based, right? Meaning 2/3 of your plate should contain foods that come from plants, 1/3 animal. Remember, plant versus animal, majority plant foods. And that means when you have all these plant foods, plant Plants have fiber in it. So you naturally are eating a high fiber diet. Plants have these phenomenal compounds called phytonutrients, phyto meaning plant, that are in the colors of the fruits and vegetables. They're naturally low in added sugars. They're naturally low in sodium. You're lower in fats, saturated fats. And the beauty of looking at food this way, it's adaptable to any culture in any country. So people will say to me, what's the type of diet, is the Mediterranean diet the best diet to eat? I'm like, well, and the Mediterranean diet is a form of this, but it's not the only one. So as I say, I wouldn't ask Pima Indians in Arizona to eat a Mediterranean diet. They don't recognize those foods. But in the cultural foods of Pima Indians, they have a predominantly plant-based diet. In fact, most cultures historically eat a predominantly plant-based diet. And then in the American diet, we distort that and we make it a high protein, meat-centric. What's for dinner? You think of the meat, not like what vegetables and grains am I going to have? Right? So it's very different, but it's adaptable. Okay. Any questions? All right. So the benefits of this predominantly plant-based way of eating is that it just naturally promotes weight management without even having to think about it. You're not dieting, right? You don't even have to weigh yourself. It fuels your body and nourishes your body the way it was designed and needs to be nourished. So your body just goes to its natural weight. It's useful in prevention of 14 different types of cancers, including breast cancer. It prevents heart disease and type 2 diabetes. Remember, we're concerned about that as late effects of treatment. And the mechanisms, the way it works, and Melinda will get into more of that, the weeds of that, is that it basically reduces inflammation in the body, reduces circulating insulin levels, and supports your immune system. So again, you're helping your body disrupt that cancer progression. All right. So let's just take a little quick deep dive into phytonutrients. These are captured, there are hundreds of them, and they're captured in the colors of your fruits and vegetables. So each color represents a different constellation of phytonutrients. So if you approach it like I'm capturing all these colors of the rainbow, red, yellow, green, blue, white, red, purple in my week, you're capturing these hundreds of phytonutrients. And this is what we know as food as medicine. This used to be our only form of medicine. And now we have modern medicine, which is fantastic, but we forgot about this medicine. So don't forget this. Use your plant foods and the colors of your plant foods to use as natural medicines for your body. Now, so I gave you kind of the big overview, predominantly plant-based, 2/3 plant, 1/3 animal. However, to actually do this in our culture is very difficult. Sorry. We live in a culture that does not promote this. We live in a culture that promotes added sugars, that promotes salt, that promotes fat because it tastes good. Right? There are reasons for that, evolutionary wise. Our body loves these, and that's not lost on the food scientists that work in the food industry. They exploit our biology to sell manufactured foods. So that whole idea of reducing processed food is no small task because we're surrounded by it. So to eat well, to eat a predominantly plant-based diet, you have to be intentional and think about, I always say, it's the environment, stupid. It's not you. We're up against big obstacles, so you have to be very intentional. So before I hand it over to the exercise side of things with Melinda, any questions?
So thank you, Maura. And so I'm going to now just present a little bit about the importance of physical activity. Currently, we have the dietary guidelines. We also have physical activity guidelines, and this is based on hundreds and thousands of studies showing that the maximal benefit in sort of reducing mortality or risk of developing cancer, heart disease, is 2.5 hours per week of physical activity at a moderate intensity, such as brisk walking. So 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. Or if you can do vigorous physical activity, 75 minutes per week is what's recommended. Or you can do a combination of moderate and vigorous. But there's a lot of evidence of just a walking program significantly reducing risk of mortality and also development of disease. And then what many of us don't get is strength training. So importance of twice a week strength training. You can do this at home with just random things in your house, and there's so many apps and websites you can go to, and there might be only 4 exercises you have to do a couple times a week to really maintain or improve your muscular strength. So how do we know this? So I show this slide that is based on, as I said, hundreds plus studies. And these are called prospective cohort studies, where people complete questionnaires and they wear monitors to show what is their physical activity level at a given point in time, say in their 30s, 40s, or 50s. And then they're followed for 10 or 20 years until, unfortunately, they are diagnosed with cancer or heart disease or have a death. And you can't kind of mess with the data. There's no recall bias or trying to favorably recall that you did more or this or that, because it was done and then people were followed. And time again, these studies show a significant benefit of going from no physical activity, which is on the top left here, to just doing something. You go see how this goes, this figure goes down. You see the most benefit from going from nothing to something. That's why actually the most important recommendation is to reduce your sedentary time. We've become very sedentary because of these devices and even being able to work from home, work from your bed if you want, that we've become very inactive. And so trying to reduce that sedentary behavior, even if it's not at all close to 2.5 hours per week of moderate intensity activity, there is benefit. The max benefit is at about that 2.5 hours per week. What's also really important to look at is just the steps we get. Most of us all have an iPhone, and on that there's an app. It's the Heart app. And if you go to it, you click on it, you can see how much walking, how many steps you accumulated the day prior, the week prior, the month prior. And you could look at it. And on average, most Americans, adults, get about 4,000 to 5,000 steps per day. The goal, the maximal benefit, is around 10,000 steps per day. We know 2,000 steps is a mile. So 10,000 steps is about 5 miles a day. That doesn't mean going out for a 5-mile walk. That means all the walking from when you wake till you go to bed at night, even just walking around your house. And so if you look at your Heart app and you had, say, 3,000 steps per day, make your goal to increase maybe 1,000 steps to get to 4,000. And then you work on that. I'm not saying you have to get to 10,000 steps, but just sort of monitor, and every increment is better. And there was a recent study that came out last year that I thought was really important, based on, if you look at the top left here, 17 cohort studies. That's those prospective cohort studies of over 200,000 participants. And they followed them till all-cause mortality, so death due to cancer or heart disease. And they found that 1,000-step increment was associated with a 15% reduction in all-cause mortality. So look at your Heart app, see what you're walking yesterday, and try to increase it 1,000 steps, and it will have significant impact. And this sometimes seems too good to be true, but it is consistent time. And again, every study shows that there is no harm to increasing physical activity. There is only benefit. And as Maura mentioned, in breast cancer, there's 3 primary mechanisms of how exercise and eating healthy improves our outcomes. And it's through inflammation, estrogen, and insulin, or metabolic hormones. And we have evidence from the trials we've done here, exercise and nutrition trials, where we take women with breast cancer and we enroll them into increasing their exercise and eating a more plant-based diet. And we measure at baseline, we take a blood draw, and then at the end of the intervention, we do another blood draw, and we measure all these markers, and we see significant favorable changes in these markers with just walking and eating a plant-based diet. And so one trial, and I know this is very busy, but estrone levels, which this is the primary estrogen in postmenopausal women. All you have to look at, this was an exercise diet or the combination. You see all the reduction in estrogen with this exercise and nutrition intervention, about a 15% reduction in estrone levels. We know estrogen is not beneficial for breast cancer. And then this just shows all these other hormones here, these metabolic and inflammatory biomarkers. And look at all the negative signs, the reductions that we see. And then a trial that we did here at Yale among women who were about 2 years out of their breast cancer diagnosis. And we enrolled them into a plant-based diet and a walking program. And they naturally, by just switching to that plant-based diet, they lost, the purple bars here, they lost 6% body weight. And this was measured from DEXA scans, which is, it's very objective measure. And that translated into a 30% decrease in CRP, C-reactive protein, which is a measure of chronic inflammation systemically in your body. So this walking and plant-based diet, a 30% decrease in inflammation and a decrease in insulin and leptin as well. This is one study that we've done, but there's been many others done across the country by colleagues of ours and internationally showing consistent findings as well. You don't have to run a marathon. You don't have to do some, crazy type of exercise program, but just adding in walking and shifting a bit of your diet can see these changes. We just completed a trial that enrolled women during chemotherapy. Is it possible to change your physical activity and your diet during chemotherapy? And what's its effect on outcomes? And we followed the nutrition guidelines that Maura already discussed. We followed the physical activity guidelines. And what we found is women during chemotherapy for breast cancer, the blue bar was the nutrition exercise intervention. They were able to increase their physical activity during chemo with our counseling program and also their diet quality. And surprisingly, this translated to what we found in the women who had neoadjuvant chemo before surgery. And at the time of their surgery, we were able to look at their pathologic complete response, their PathCR or PCR measure, which is an evidence of breast cancer left. So a PCR means there's no evidence of breast cancer. And those enrolled in the nutrition and exercise intervention, the pink bar, 53% of them had no evidence of breast cancer at surgery versus 28% in the usual care group. So this was powerful. This was a secondary outcome. So we're cautious in the interpretation. So we're writing a grant right now to do this study specifically to women with triple negative breast cancer, to do this trial during their chemotherapy to see really does the finding hold in that next study. And the last slide, you can't read it. It's a poster from ASCO, but we are starting a trial open to enrollment for women specifically with metastatic breast cancer. And it's only an exercise intervention. And it's a home-based exercise program, but you do have to come into Yale for 3 visits, one at baseline, one at 8 weeks, and one at 16 weeks for a treadmill test as a measure of fitness. We want to see what your baseline fitness is, the exercise program, the improvement in your fitness, and how that's related to other breast cancer outcomes. So it's specific to metastatic breast cancer. If you are interested in participating, please reach out to us. You can find us. Our name is in the program, and you can Google our name and get our email. And that will be starting enrollment in January. So with that, take any additional questions.
Well, it struck me when you saw those results. They're striking results from these studies, and we always joke that, man, this would have been on the front page of the New York Times, but because it's just boring diet and exercise, like it just doesn't seem to get the attention. Because these are really striking results. So it's something very powerful, but it's really, the other we say, is your contribution to your care, because this is what's within your power.
And most importantly, it never should be done in lieu of adjuvant treatment and chemotherapy, immunotherapy. It's a nice supportive care to it as well.
Yeah, any questions?
I think it's lunchtime too. Yeah.
Can you speak about macros, especially protein? Because I work out, and that venue is a gram per body weight and all of that. But then I'm concerned about getting mTOR revved up with too much protein. So can you address?
Yeah, so macros meaning macronutrients, which are the 3 components of your diet that provide energy. So that would be carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. So a gram of carbohydrate gives you 4 calories. A gram of protein gives you 4 calories, and a gram of fat gives you 9 calories. So fat is very energy dense. So in that realm of the gym world, they promote protein to promote development of muscle. And I say they over promote it. So in the ideal way of eating for prevention of disease, it's 55% of your calories should be from carbohydrate. And that's carbohydrates. Again, if you're doing plants, you know, the plant-based, it's carbohydrates, fiber, and phytonutrients. It's not a chocolate bar. You know, it's fruit, vegetables, grains, beans. And then about roughly 50 to 55% carbohydrate, 25 to 30% fat, because it's so energy dense, and then just 15 to 20% protein. So again, that plate of 2/3 being plant foods, 1/3 animal, it puts all your macros in the right distribution. All right, so I do not believe, I think it's false to promote muscle development through a high protein diet, because what happens, people don't realize when you eat protein, you need carbohydrate with it so that the body uses the carbohydrate as energy and the protein goes for building muscle. If you only eat protein, guess what the body does? It breaks down the protein and converts it into carbohydrate for fuel. All right, so you're putting a metabolic stress on your body. You're stressing your kidneys and your lungs. So, you know, the body is so wise. So if we fuel our body in the way it's designed to receive fuel, everything works harmoniously. But if you start putting a very high protein, your body has to do all sorts of machinations to get it to what it should be. When just eating that proportion, 1/3 animal with the carbohydrate and the exercise, you'll get the muscle development that you need. Thanks for asking that. Did I get on a soapbox? Because it drives me crazy. Yes.
So question, so 2/3 of your plate should be plant-based, and like, how much of that would be good to be carbs, like potatoes or whatever, like?
Those are all carbs, 2/3, yeah. So, all vegetables are carbohydrates, all fruits are carbohydrates, all grains are carbohydrates. So carbs are good, but they all have fiber. And with the colors, those are the phytonutrients. I know, because that's what's out there too, carbs are bad. It's like, no, not all carbs are equal. Right?
I
So-
think sometimes too, where where you hear not misinformation, but when people are like, oh, go on a low carb diet, it might be because they're consuming too many calories in their diet because they really love that pasta and they eat the whole box of pasta. And it might be easier for that person to then reduce their carbohydrate intake because they eat so much pasta. And that's where, you know, it's like, oh, eat lower carbs. It's just because you're eating too many, you know, overall, and it might be easier to reduce that part of your diet, right?
Right, you always have to find out, well, what were you doing?
Yeah.
Before you make the change, because that's always the key question.
Yeah.
Because it may have been way out of whack, and so for that person saying, "Oh, I went high protein, low carb," may have put it into better proportion for them
Yeah.
than what they were doing. So you always have to play a bit of detective.
But we rarely are eating a low protein diet unless you're a strict vegan and have, you know, but rarely in our diet. Like if you eat one steak a week, you're probably, you know, I mean,
We exceed our protein requirements as Americans.
Just to really like hop on that really quickly with like, you know, the whole lower carbs. It's so easy to go into a grocery store and find all the packaged foods with all the nutritional information, but it's very rare to pick up, you know, lettuce or kale or collard greens and actually see the nutritional count on it. So we don't realize that those phytonutrients actually have carbs because it's never in our faces. Whereas all the boxes, it's like.
those are the real carbs. Those are the important carbohydrates.
Right. Right. So, you know, right, consumer education is so important, you know, and the grocery store is a great place to educate people. So read labels, read ingredients lists, but there's a lot more we can do. And the other thing is most of us get nutrition information from the diet industry and from the supplement industry. Not from the US dietary guidelines. That's why I encourage everyone to just take a read of it and it'll explain that distribution for you and be like, oh, this makes sense. Yeah.
Could you comment on how you intersperse with fish like salmon?
That's
Because
good.
I mean, you go red meat, they go over this fish ball.
Well, remember that 1/3 animal?
Yeah.
fish is that in there?
Can you have just that as 1/3?
Mhm.
Yeah, so we promote 2 to 3 servings of fish a week and red meat like once a week. And the rest you fill in with chicken, turkey, eggs, dairy, or even plant proteins like beans. Soy is not a problem with breasts. Can take a sigh of relief with that.
Oh, it's not.
It's actually protective. That's old bad knowledge that's been,
But that was sold with best.
it's a plant estrogen is actually protective.
Well, thank you so very much.